What's up, everybody? Emergency edition of the Coast to Coast podcast here on InSectCarolina.com. Coming at you, I'm Joey Powell, your host, and we're brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt. All right, thanks for being here. As you know, an emergency edition of the podcast means something big has happened around the North Carolina basketball program. And this time, it is forward Pete Nance, who has announced he is going to be transferring for his last year of availability and eligibility and any other ability you can think of to join Hubert Davis's Tar Heels. Just a recap on Pete Nance, 6'11", forward, big, great pedigree. Dad played in the NBA. I think his uncle also played in the NBA. 14.6 points, 6.5 rebounds, 2.7 assists, and a little over 1 block per game last year with Northwestern. Also made 45% of his three-pointers and was named honorable mention All Big Ten. So with me, as always, Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran. Sean, how you feeling, dude?
Doing well. Always enjoy these types of podcasts.
Yeah, well, before I bring Sherrell in here, I want to get you to get us started. What's different between what we've seen of Pete Nance now, maybe than what we saw as a college player versus now what we saw when he went through the NBA Combine, the Draft Combine, and also the G League Combine process? What have we learned about his game that maybe we didn't know a few months ago?
Sure. I think when we first really started diving in on Pete Nance, it was right around the G League Combine. Obviously, when somebody is there, they're trying to get to the NBA or get to the next level. And the thinking, or at least my thinking, was you've got a 6'11" guy who's played 4 years, averaged, as you said, 14 and 6-7 rebounds, very efficient. He might not be NBA caliber, but he could probably go make some good money overseas. It's not like he's a 6'7" wing where they're a dime a dozen, but here's a 6'11" guy that can shoot. So I figured the chances of him going back to school were fairly slim. And then if he did go back to school, he obviously needs to improve on certain skills. And then it comes down to, does the player want to go to a school where they're going to be fully featured, or knowing UNC and everybody they're returning, does he want to go to a school and fit in where maybe his points and rebounds will drop, but maybe he has a chance to play at a higher level? So that's been figured out now. He obviously wanted to play at a higher level. I think from watching more game film, the time allowed us to do that. And also when we were first talking, you're looking at a guy who can really fill Brady Manek's open spot. That's the one spot that is left. I think when we're looking at Matthew Meyer, you saw maybe a guy who people could imagine being Brady Manek, but I think there was some challenges with that, where he was really a 4-3, a 3-4, and now you're really repetitive with a Puff Johnson and Dontrez Styles. With Pete Nance, you're looking at predominantly a 5 at Northwestern, so a 5, I'd say a 5-4, given he will be slotted in that 4 spot. But now you have a guy, if God forbid Armando gets hurt, or if he gets in foul trouble, you have a guy that can slide into those minutes, which I think will be very beneficial. And you have a guy that we'll go in more in depth, but a really talented outside shooter. So now you have that floor spacing, and you have a guy that is a very strong passer. So the ball is going to keep moving. So I think we'll get into it a little bit more, but from a chemistry perspective, I think his skill level, we've been able to maybe identify where he's going to fit a little bit better than a few months ago.
I want to bring the other guy that you guys are always here to see, and not to say that Sean is the guy and Sherrell is the other guy, or Sherrell is the guy and Sean is the other guy. You guys know what I mean. But the second half of the powerhouse duo that leads this podcast, Sherrell McMillan. Sherrell, how you feeling, bub?
I'm good. Yourself?
Man, I'm great. You obviously got the red shirt memo, and if you're like me, this is the only red shirt I own for obvious reasons. So, listen, I want to ask you, how did we get to this point? Like, how did this whole process transpire? Because I don't know, at least in my time of following these types of things, and granted, the history of the transfer portal is not very long. I don't recall a situation where it was this kind of kept under wraps to where no one was talking. And I know that's kind of something you've tipped off on our recent podcast here when we're talking about, this potential transfer from Nance to North Carolina. So give everybody an idea about how this developed and what do you think happened behind the scenes and how we got to where we are right now.
Honestly, it played out a bit like Brady Manek's last year. So if you recall, it just was a little bit more elongated. So Brady Manek entered the portal, and within like I think 12 days or something, he was committed to UNC. But he didn't take a visit to Carolina like Nance obviously did over the last few days. But he didn't really do any interviews. He didn't put out formal lists that often. Didn't do a lot of social media. It was kind of the day of his commitment to UNC, a couple hours before we got word. Now with this one, some word leaked out about a visit, but beside that, Nance had really not talked to anyone on record, maybe a couple people, and props to those people who were able to get him. But he did just kept it quiet, and I think that's a decision the family made because for the first part of it, when UNC first made contact, we do know basically what was said was, hey, I might be interested, but I really need to see this process through with the NBA. So really nothing can be done before June 1st. That was kind of the message that I think the Carolina staff received from Nance. And then as, it started to find out that he wasn't going to stay in the draft, that's when I think UNC really started to call more, to be more aggressive, and to try to get him on campus for a visit, which it took a couple of weeks from that deadline, but he ended up making it. So again, I'm not going to pretend like we have all the inside baseball minutia on this one. Basically, the pivot points are he decides to enter the draft in the portal. UNC makes contact soon thereafter. Both parties agree that nothing can happen until June 1st. He withdraws on June 1st. They have conversations over the last couple of weeks. He takes a visit. The visit starts on the afternoon of the 15th. And here we are now with him committed. That's kind of the Cliff Notes version. Hopefully one day we can ask him those questions about the stuff happening in between. But that's the high level view of how we got here.
Sherrell, I want to ask you, how does having a veteran presence like this walking into the locker room? I'm going to come to Sean for the skill piece. I want you to just talk about chemistry. How does having a guy who's played high-level basketball, who comes from the pedigree that Nance comes from, how does adding him into a pretty strong locker room coming off of last season, how does that help the Tar Heels?
Well, at the start of this recording, we don't know what he said. So he could have put out a statement by now. We could have talked to him by now. Wanted to get this out as soon as possible, so we're recording it right after we found out. So I think what it says is that he really, to Sean's point, values winning. I think he sees that there's a lot of talent on this team, and that if he can ingratiate himself into everything that North Carolina is, then you'll get the benefits. I mean, I think that's Hubert Davis's message has been that the whole time was, if you do what you're supposed to do on the court, play well, play smart, play together, all that good stuff, then you will get the benefits. Back to Roy Williams' awards and rewards. And I think just looking at how much those guys have shined over the last couple of months, and how it just everything got flipped 180 degrees, I think he sees that. And then just from a personnel perspective, he brings them something that they don't have. He brings depth behind Armando Bacot. He brings either the starting, power forward starting four, or in competition for that spot. He just really rounds out the team overall. And it's good, it's a lot easier, I think, to go into a team that has strong leaders already than it is to go in and try to become one. I think we saw some of that last year. Justin McCoy to some degree, Brady Manick to some degree, kind of went up against that, trying to figure out where they fit and how they fit within the dynamic of the team. I think the hierarchy and dynamics of leadership are already pretty set on this team. So it's going to be much easier for someone to kind of assimilate this offseason than it was last season.
And I'm not going to go out, and go straight to get the cheap pop by saying to Sherrell, attitude, reflect leadership. I wouldn't do that. I'm not going to just make a remember the Titans quote just to pop Sherrell.
You're not going to do that.
No, I'm not going to do that. Sean, one thing I want to ask you, and this is kind of the second half of the question I just posed to Sherrell. How does Pete Nance make this team better from a skills perspective?
Well, before I get to that, Sherrell said assimilate, and I think that's really important because I think maybe when we're looking at Matthew Meyer, it might have been a little hard to for him to have assimilated to the current team. And I think this one, now we haven't talked to him, we don't know him, but this is just reading body language as on the court, and it feels like he will be able to fit in versus trying to have maybe more of a dominant personality, which I don't think would mesh well with a team that has returned what they are and did what they did. From a skill perspective, really the change in last year's team was people started bringing their game up to Brady Manek's level regarding moving the ball. We every single Sunday night podcast we were talking about the ball's not moving, the ball's not moving. All of a sudden, the ball starts to move a little bit better. And with Pete Nance, I think he's not a guy that is going to over dribble. He's not a guy that is going to make it about himself. And he's somebody that can move the ball. He's either going to catch it wide open in a pick and pop and shoot it. He's going to catch it and attack very quickly, or he's going to move the ball and find the cutter, or in the high low find Armando down low. So I think that perspective is huge for UNC, especially as they're looking to win a championship, which we know is not easy. And then defensively, that is going to be the question mark, especially when he is slotted with Armando. Similar to Brady, teams are going to try to attack him. Brady, outside of a few games in the middle of the season, was able to hold his own. If it's a smaller wing, will Nance be able to do that? But when Armando's off, he's going to be able to slot in at the 5, and he had a extremely strong block percentage last year, good shot blocker. So I think from a skill perspective, offensively, it's stretching the floor, but moving the ball and being a good team player.
Yeah, I love the point you made about passing the ball too. As you guys have said on prior episodes of the show, when UNC was at their best last year, when the offense was flowing, is when they were moving the ball, and that was a lot of times started with a guy like Brady Manek. And just from my knowledge, it just doesn't look like you can get that sort of savvy and understanding how the court is tilted horizontally from somebody that hasn't played a lot of D1 games. And that's just the only thing you're going to find that in is from a vet. Sherrell?
And that's the other thing, Joey. I mean, he's played a ton of games. I mean, you look at the amount of experience now that UNC could potentially put into a starting 5. I don't know what the starting 5 is going to be. I'm not saying anyone is slotted into a spot, but let's just say it's the 4 returners: Caleb Love, RJ Davis, Leaky Black, Armando Bacot, and say you slide Nance in there. I mean, you're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of starts and minutes and experiences and games, and just, been through everything. So, in college basketball right now, it seems like experienced talent is what wins. And I mean, we talked about it last year. I don't see how you can have, if there's a team with more experienced talent than North Carolina in college basketball next season, which you might get to this in a second, but I'm going to go ahead and segue, which changes everything now, man. I mean, this is not, we talked about it when everybody came back, but you're adding to this. There's not a fun fairy tale story anymore. This is a team built to do one thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that the season will be a failure if they don't do that thing, but it's obvious that, this is, I liken it to like the Los Angeles Rams in free agency, when you're like, how can they afford another, really good player? In this case, it's like North Carolina had a scholarship come open at the very last minute, the last possible second from the transfer portal, and they were able to convert it into a player like Pete Nance, who, is on everybody's board as one of the, top 10 or 12 transfers. So now there's coverage, I feel like, at every position. Before it was like, oh, well, who might back up, Bacot? Well, there's a chance that Nance can do that. It's like, well, who might start at the 4? And, do they need another shooter? Well, they've got that potentially in Nance. Then you have the guys coming back in the backcourt. You add Trimble and, some growth for some other players. And there's just not a lot of holes on this roster. So Hubert Davis now inherits, which I think will be the consensus number 1 team in the country in the preseason. And so now you have to adjust. I think in his press conference, I believe that was Wednesday, he said last year they had to tune out the noise of everybody telling them how terrible they are. This year they had to tune out the noise of everybody telling them how great they are, which is just, again, the day after the Pittsburgh game, who saw this coming? But I think adding Nance, it adds to the notion that, they're going for it. And, this team has those kind of aspirations legitimately.
It's ironic, man. If you look at now, you were talking about kind of the dearth of experience that the team had coming into last season. And now kind of the counterfactual of your point is there anything that this team will not have seen? Is there anything that another team could present to them that somebody on this roster has not seen or played through before?
There's no other group of guys who have been up by 25 against the number 1 seed in the second half, lost the lead in the most spectacular way possible, found a way to win in overtime and end up in the national championship game with a 3 to tie it as time expires. I mean, there's nothing between those two. There's nothing left for these guys to experience that they haven't. You know,
Yeah.
maybe they have to come back from 45 down. Maybe that's it. But I don't think they'll be down by 45 next season. So,
And to your point about the expectations for next season, yeah, this is one of those. Congratulations, Tar Heel fans! You got the old misery back, right? Like it's going to be the old agony that Tar Heel fans and IC subscribers are used to. Where, man, we only won by 6, or why are we down by 2 with 12 minutes left to go in the half? Like that sort of misery, as opposed to not knowing the identity of a team. Sean, is there a way to overstate how much bringing in experience means?
I don't think you can overstate it. I mean, it gives Nance the ability to contribute from day one versus, I mean, even say, let's use Dawson Garcia as an example, not in
It's easy to do. It's okay.
We're thinking, but he still only had one year under his belt, but the expectations that he had were pretty high. And here you have a guy 4 years under the belt. It's going to take some time to get the system. But I think he's used to playing outside in from Northwestern. And I once again, going back to now, here's a guy, Big Ten, Northwestern, not the strongest of programs. And he was a number one option, but maybe he is more comfortable. I don't know how much more efficient he can get because he was already super efficient, but maybe if he's the third, fourth option, it's a dangerous lineup that you can put out there.
We can officially call this show a wrap because Sean has had his chance to take a crap on Big Ten basketball. So with that, Sherrell, is there anything else you'd like to say about this commitment from transfer Pete Nance before we get out of here?
No, I mean, the roster is set. It's we thought it was set, on May 1st, and then that happened. So the roster is finally set. So now everybody can kind of turn the page and really look forward to next season now that we know who's on the team. So I just think they really do have a chance. I don't think it's it's talking out of turn to say that this team has everything it takes to win a national championship. Now, obviously, they have to go out and do it.
Sure.
But I mean, in a potential starting lineup, you're going third year junior, fifth year senior, fourth year senior. I mean, that's pretty incredible in this day and age of college basketball. And it's not like those guys weren't talented or weren't wanted coming out of high school. We're talking about most of those guys. I think both Nance and Leakey were top 100 coming out of high school. Baycott and Davis and Love were obviously McDonald's All-Americans and top 25 types. So this isn't diamonds in the rough who were ranked, 545 at age 24, finally coming to their own in college basketball. These are talented guys who happen to stay around too.
Yeah, I mean, all these guys are on the Perry Ellis, Donald Hand, and all four Boeheim plan. Sean, anything else you wanted to add before we get out of here?
Just one thing. We were talking earlier about what the thought process really a month and a half ago. And one thing I was really excited to see Puff and Styles, if they did have to take that 4 spot, how they would grow. And I think this still gives them that opportunity with a little less pressure because even though Nance might be, say he's starting at the 4, he's still going to get 5, maybe more minutes at the center spot, depending on Armando, foul trouble, any injuries, things of that nature. So now that's just time for Puff and Styles to play. And then in addition, now when Leakey's coming out, that's time to slot them in as well. So I think you have a little bit more lineup flexibility, the ability to hopefully keep their growth trajectory continuing to go up. And who knows what Hubert wants to decide at the end of the games, deciding on, based on lineups and who's playing well. But I think the excitement is still there to see them grow, but maybe not as much pressure in that really fifth spot for UNC's offense.
That's a good place to wrap on because I think I want to do a show sometime very soon about the potential versatility in lineup matchups that UNC can throw out next year because I think it's going to it's going to be an embarrassment of riches just from the versatility of 5 players that they can put out, right? Like different groups and different styles of play they'll be able to put on the floor. Boys, as always, I appreciate it. Appreciate you guys making some time for an emergency pod here. Again, Pete Nance commits to the University of North Carolina. Will use his final year of eligibility playing for the Tar Heels. Will be great to see another player with an NBA pedigree suiting up in Carolina blue. So that'll be fun to watch. Big shout out to Johnny T-Shirt. Undoubtedly, the thing that won him over in his visit to Chapel Hill was a trip to Johnny T-Shirt. I cannot confirm that folks saw he and his family walking out of Johnny T with 6 bags under each arm. I can't confirm that. But it would not surprise me if we found out later on that Johnny T-Shirt and their incredible line of goods and their amazing top line customer service and their alumni ownership were the things that kind of tilted Pete Nance towards Chapel Hill. So very glad to hear that. Would not be shocked to hear that confirmed at some point. Boys, as always, love doing these shows with you. Thanks to everybody who is listening and or watching. We appreciate you as well. Remember, subscribe, rate, review. We need all of that from you. It really helps us out on our end. But until next time, we will catch all of you later. Thanks to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring. Thanks to John Sigley for producing. But for Sean Moran, for Sherrell McMillan, I'm Joey Powell. This has been an emergency podcast of the Coast to Coast here on InsideCarolina.com. Late.